Welcome to this week's almost abstract weekly outdoor
Boring.
news. My name is Rob Yates. I am one of your hosts, and tonight we have the East if I'm West, the Lewis if I'm Clark, the Grey Owl if I'm the Hudson Bay Company. We have a vegetable to my garden, a Smith to Wesson, a rod to my reel, Mr. Mark Hopkins.
A Smith to my Wesson. That's quite a good one. I quite like that one.
Yeah, there we go. And you can be a vegetable in my garden.
Yeah, I was ignoring that one very quickly. You've been doing too much homesteading.
That's it. I have been doing homesteading and vegetable gardening and animal husbandry recently.
I've actually found a very cool article that we're going to talk about next week. We couldn't fit it into this week, but next week there's an article about how to make your backyard wildlife friendly. And I thought you could provide some of your tips that you're doing at the moment.
Ooh. For those who don't know, I've got quite a big backyard, but I'm looking to increase it by the 75 times.
And the rest
in the next few months. I'm looking to buy, no, it's 75 times. I'm looking to buy a 75,000 square meter plot of land with 2 houses on it, one of which is a farmhouse, and the other one's an Airbnb. That'd be quite exciting. Barry Hughes says you need to drink brandy. It's good for pain.
Done. I'm going to get Can you recommend a good brandy?
I'm sure he can. He's a man of many talents. So I'm sure Barry can. Maybe he's got some in his hip flask, but we'll see. We'll see. So here we are, this week's weekly news. And this week, the news has been, I have to say, slightly hard to find. It appears that the outdoors is opening up, but it also appears that there was lots of doom and gloom. In fact, Mark, did you notice that when we went through looking for the news this week, the quantity of people who've decided to break a limb, fall off a cliff, or drown themselves has been actually quite high in the past week, which is very disappointing.
Yeah, there's been no stupidity at the moment. I'm very disappointed.
Yeah.
Soon we're going to have to make up our own news. You know that.
Oh, I could do that. Why ruin a good story on the background of truth? I mean, that's just what journalists do, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And certain presidents, I think.
I've been listening to the Joe Rogan podcast with Jocko Willink this afternoon while entertaining my daughter and trying to get some work done. And there's been no shortage of blows in a particular president's direction. Let's just leave it like that, shall we?
Joe Rogan's very public in who he supports, isn't he?
Yeah, Jocko Willink for president. That's what I reckon.
I mean, very entertaining. And next Navy SEAL as president, that'd be quite good fun.
Excellent. He loves extreme leadership. Can you imagine him duffing over all those people in Washington, D.C.? Anyway, enough of that. The first thing I want to talk about tonight brings a smile to my face and joy to my heart. And that is the fact of how much high demand kayaks are in Alabama right now. And this brings joy to my heart, partly because I've kayaked since the age of about this big. And also, the article tells us that the shops are all selling out of their kayaks. There's queues going around the block for people who want to go hire kayaks to go out for an hour, 2 hours a day or an afternoon. And it just means that the outdoor industry is getting back and thriving again. You know, in the outdoor industry for so many years, you'd go into a shop and the whole supply and demand thing. Well, the shop would have a supply and you could pretty much demand whatever you liked. And in Alabama at this point in time, the shop owners are saying no discounts and there's a waiting list for what it is that you want. And I just think that is absolutely brilliant.
What's so special about kayaking in Alabama?
I don't think that it's actually kayaking. I mean, Alabama's quite warm because it's south in the US. So I suppose that would have an impact at this sort of end of spring, beginning of summer sort of time. So it's warm, people want to go out. But I would rather suspect, having spoken to a bunch of people in the I rather suspect that it's got something to do with the fact that the sort of people are breaking free of lockdown. Whether they're allowed to or not is a whole different story. But you know, Mark, you were saying to me earlier, that you went shopping and the shops were packed and heaving and nobody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. So I guess that's true across the world.
Yeah, talking about like outdoor shops. One of my first memories when I started going, so I got into hiking probably when I was 10, I reckon. My school did these like day on Sunday. You get to school at 4 a.m. You get in a little minibus. You drive to Snowdon. You climb up Snowdon, and then you drive back. And like one of the highlights was going to the outdoor shop, because at those days I used to hire my hiking boots for the day. And I used to love going into those outdoor shops and just trying on kit and playing around. Oh, like one of my first, as a kid, the worst thing to do is to go shopping. I used to hate it. I still hate it like a passion. But going into an outdoor shop was like going into the sweet shop for me.
Yeah. It is incredible. Sean Altman, who's live with us in the We Get Outdoors tribe, says that a lot of the boat ramps have been closed in the pandemic. And actually, it's probably easier, therefore, for people to access waterways and go fishing, do whatever they're going to do with a kayak than it is with a motorboat. So maybe that's another reason why the kayaks are in such high demand in Alabama. I don't know. It's another conspiracy theory. I'm just delighted for all of those people who've had their shops shut and haven't been selling outdoor stuff for the past few months. I'm delighted that they're starting to make money. Because my biggest fear, most of the outdoor industry, for some weird reason, actually no, because they've got a bad business model, generally reduce what they do dramatically during the winter months. And so with coronavirus for the Northern Hemisphere, March, April, May, I was thinking, if this carries on into June, July, and August, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of outdoor businesses will close. But the fact that it's reopening and the summer's arriving and they're actually going to make some money and trade again actually puts a spring in my step and some joy, the fact that the industry is going to be here and thriving this summer, even if it's not supposed to be.
Should we use that as a nice little link into one thing we're going to talk about later, but I know nothing about, which is this Great Outdoors Act?
Yeah. That was I've got to find it, but that was a bipartisan act of Congress or Senate or something like that in the US.
It's got to go through Senate still. It's $900 million.
$900 million.
That they want to put into the outdoors. I think it's into what we're talking about, the outdoors industry.
Oh, sorry, we've lost Mark's internet again. I think he's talking about shops and trails and all sorts of things.
Yeah, putting $900 million into the outdoors industry, into shops and education centers and stuff. I think that's freaking cool. And apparently Trump's going to sign it if it gets through Senate.
What I particularly like about this this bill that they're looking to put through is I particularly like it because it's a cross-party. So it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican. It's actually got the backing across the whole floor. Which means it's very, very likely to go through. And I wonder where how you spend $900 million. I got given a budget once to go and set up an outdoor centre. I got given £85,000 to go and set up a new outdoor centre that was there in bricks and mortar, but I had to go and buy tents and paddles and kayaks and rucksacks and climbing stuff. And I got to about £45,000 and I was like, what do I buy now? It actually got quite hard. Well, because the more you buy, the bigger discount people you get. So you spend like $5,000 and that's all right. You spend $20,000 and that's all right. And then suddenly the people realize you're really serious. And then they start giving you bigger and bigger and bigger discounts on things. And then suddenly you think you spent $20,000, but actually you've only spent 12. And it got really, really hard to spend all of that money.
It's a nice problem to have.
It is. And this was, by the way, we are talking 20-something years ago. So this is a little while ago, because I do realize that $50,000 now is just like 100 Gore-Tex jackets if you're lucky. So I realize now it doesn't go that far. But back then it went a long, long, long way. Oh dear. we've lost Mark, so we're going to move on. So kayaks are in high demand in Alabama. $900 million potentially going into the outdoor industry through some, what do you call it, act of Senate, some bill or something like that going through the Senate that Trump's going to sign. But I want us now to go back a few years to one of the largest unanswered questions in the outdoor world. One of the argument, like, is it a conspiracy theory? What happened? Did people actually survive? And you may well remember that Mallory and my computer and Irvine were two guys who tried to go and climb Everest Mount Everest back in the early 1900s. I think 1924 to be precise. And they set off from from Camp 5 on Everest, and they were never to be seen again. Nobody knows whether they summited the mountain, whether they didn't summit the mountain, whether one of them summited the mountain and then defected to China. There's another possibility. We do know that Mallory was found in 1999 by a British expedition that went to go and like track their steps and whatever else, and they found they found him, and they found an ice axe that he dropped. He'd broken a bunch of bones, but Irvine never ever got found. There was also some cryptic stuff on Mallory, according to this article. And he had a notebook that had all sorts of very cryptic numbers and codes and measurements that still to this day, nobody actually understands what they're there for and what they stand for. They were just there in a notebook inside his jacket pocket at Camp 5, which is 8,000 meters-ish above sea level. Your sound's disappeared, mate. So who knows what happens? Mark, you're into conspiracy theories. What do you reckon happened? So we know what happened to Mallory. What do you reckon happened to Irvine?
I think that he got kidnapped and escaped and then hung out with Hitler in his Alpine retreat and died in the 1960s.
So that goes. So I was watching another documentary the other day. I was watching with a guy called Tim Kennedy, who's an ex-US Army Special Forces Ranger or something like that, who's presented a documentary on History Channel or something like that, or Discovery Channel. I think it's called Finding Hitler or something like that. And well, so if Irvine's gone with Hitler, there is a very, very high degree of chance that Hitler ended up not dying, but actually, or not dying at the end of the Second World War when they thought he did, but actually going in a U-boat to Argentina.
Really? Well, yeah. Irvine went on a U-boat to Argentina then.
Well, there we go. Because the Russians got the bodies of, who was Hitler's lady friend?
Edward. Oh my gosh, yes. It's going to come to me in a moment of brilliance.
It'll come to me as well. Anyway, the supposed bodies of Hitler and his lady's friend, if somebody
Graf.
on Facebook,
it's Graf something.
No, it's not. I'll find it. Their bodies were found, and the Russians got their bodies. And when the bodies got given back, they got the body of the woman, but the man who got given to them by DNA was 10 years younger than Adolf Hitler.
Really?
So it wasn't actually the body of Hitler. And then then Tim Kennedy goes into, I've got completely sidetracked now. We're going to go for it anyway. Then in his investigation, he goes to Argentina and starts looking around Argentina for like what evidence is there. Do you know there's over 100,000 Argentinians of direct German descent of like 1 or 2 generations removed, living in German-speaking only villages and towns in Argentina today.
I didn't know German-speaking towns. That's insane.
Yeah. So they don't speak any Spanish, he was saying. Like, he went there and he speaks really good Spanish, and he goes there and starts speaking Spanish and nobody understands him. And then his translator starts speaking German. They're like, oh, yeah. And there's pictures and medals of people's grandfathers and uncles in full SS uniforms and their medals and everything, the whole lot.
Yeah, I knew there was a big exodus at the end of the Second War. The Germans, a lot of the higher-ranking Nazis escaped to Argentina. That's quite cool, and if Hitler went there as well.
But so nobody knows. But there's lots of stories, which, I mean, the stories are 80 years old or 70 years old at this point in time, of a short guy with black hair and a little moustache walking around arrogantly in Argentina. There's lots of like folklore stories and stuff like that. So climbing Everest, Mallory died. We now know that. Mark reckons that Irvine went to Germany, saw the war out in Germany with Hitler in his eagle's nest, and then jumped in a U-boat and went to Argentina to see out the rest of his days.
I think it's very plausible.
Perfect. If you have any better information, please go and put it in the comments, because frankly, we're clueless. And if you know anything that we don't about Irvine and Mallory summiting Everest, because that's the other thing, Mark, is nobody knows, like, did they disappear or die before they reached the summit, or did they not?
Well, no, they're never going to know, are they? Unless there's like a talking eagle that soared across and saw them.
Exactly. And they still haven't found Irvine's body, so he's definitely in Argentina. We've got that dialed.
Exactly. Go to Argentina and you'll find it there. It's very simple. Brown.
So the worrying thing, though, is if you go climb Everest, the likelihood of you seeing a dead body and debris from dead people is almost 100% guaranteed now. As the ice packs on Everest melts more and more and more each year, it's exposing more and more and more dead bodies. So yeah, delightful, eh?
That's a lovely stat. And just two fast. Girlfriend, Eva Brown.
That's the one. Girlfriend. Graf, my foot.
No, because do you know why I say Graf? Because that's the battleship that they probably escaped to Argentina on. But I know we'll talk about it next week. But I didn't know. I learned an interesting fact last week. There have only been 6,000 people now who've summited Everest, or probably more now, but about 6,000 people have summited Everest. There are only 50 people who have got to the North Pole unaided.
Ooh.
50.
That's not very many, is it?
No, I couldn't believe it. 50 people have got to the North Pole unaided, unsupported, unaided.
Wow.
But that's a proper document. I'm determined to get that guy onto the podcast, by the way.
Awesome. I'm all for it. Let's make it happen. Let's do it. I think, is there not more people who've got up there?
Well, on that documentary, like I said, I think the documentary is in 2018, so there'll be a few more now, but I don't think it's that many more than 6,000.
Well, there we go. News. Now, Mark, you picked an article, or I picked an article around road trips and how we should have more of them. I'm not going to go into the article, Mark. What I really want to know is, in your many decades of life, what's been your favourite road trip?
I've got an interesting one, probably because I crapped myself more times than I did on any other road trip. And that was driving through Kenya on the border of Somalia and having to hire 2 mercenaries to look after us, to then getting attacked with sticks via villages, to then having the shits in bandit country, where the mercenaries wouldn't let us get out of the car until they'd gone and checked that it was safe, and I just couldn't wait any longer. So they were chasing me as I was chasing the nearest bush, to then breaking down, having 2 flat tires and only 1 spare, to then being rescued by a guy who our mercenaries didn't realize was carrying a 9mm, to then me having to drive out now into basically Somalia, and pitch black, and then every time we saw a vehicle, which was like every 2 or 3 hours, both the mercenaries were climbing out the window, pointing their rifles at the car, and then me asking, why are you doing that? Because you're probably going to get... So I ended up driving down, so I couldn't get, and the people directed me left and right. Most hair-raising road trip I've done.
Mine is I've got several road trips. I have one in Uganda, funnily enough, just over the border from Kenya there, where I got shot at by the Lord's Resistance Army whilst in a white minivan with my kayak on the roof. That was quite sporty, but that does happen if you go to a third world African country in the middle of a civil war.
Good choice. Your mum loves you for that.
Yeah, that's the other time I was kayaking the Kayaking in Nepal. And yet again, there was another civil war going on, and the two lots of troops were having a battle over the top of the gorge. And Neil and I were sleeping at the bottom of the gorge, and we just heard rounds, bullets like ricocheting off the gorge walls. But that's not really a road trip. We did do a road trip where I did 24 hours on the roof of a Nepalese bus from the end of the Sunkosi back to Pokhara in Nepal. Sat on the roof of a bus. It was the scariest, most amazing, most beautiful, weirdest, like every emotion you could probably imagine trip. The bus driver only wanted to stop every 5 hours. And if you've ever spent any time with me, you know I've got a really small bladder. So we used to climb halfway down the ladder on the back of the bus and then go for a wee off the back of the bus. So you're like 1 foot on the ladder, one arm on the ladder behind you, and then the other hand like trying to drop your shorts, get your boy bits out, have a wee, not wee all over yourself, and then put it all back again and then climb back up the ladder without falling off.
That must have been the most hilarious thing to see.
Yeah, and for some reason, tourists aren't allowed to ride on the tops of buses in Nepal anymore. I just don't understand why.
Where's the fun? There's no, as you said, that's not sport.
It's not sport. We used to ride on the roof because the quantity of bus crashes in India and Nepal is significant, like very, very high the whole time. And so we worked on as is driving off the edge of a cliff and a whole lot of other stuff. So we worked out that if we were on the roof, we could actually just jump from the roof no matter what was going to happen. And it would all be fine.
And what did you have anything to hold on the roof, or just literally it was a bus roof and that was it?
There was a roof rack, like a cage on the roof, which was had a lip on it about 20 centimeters high, like I don't know, 8 inches high, something like that. And so what we used to do is we used to make ourselves a sofa on the roof with all of the rafts from the raft company. As we used to stack those up on the roof rack and tie those down, and you make yourself a sofa to sit on the roof made out of rafts.
And just literally hang on for dear life as he goes around corners at 50, 60k an hour.
Yeah, like that is about 60 to 70 k's an hour is about as fast as it goes. Yeah, that's it. And it's fine. Like it's actually really good fun. It was, and you know, there's no air conditioning inside the bus, and it's 35 degrees and full of people. It's not very pleasant inside there. So the roof is quite warm, quite nice.
Did you have hair there to stop yourself getting burnt?
It's actually where I lost my hair is because it all got blown away from the wind.
And the good thing is you get a free meal on the roof of the bus as well. Just open your mouth and you just catch anything to eat for dinner.
Yeah. Well, what was really cool is when we used to stop at the border posts, because when you go from like county to county or province to province, there's a border post you go through. And lots of people used to run around with like bananas and chicken on sticks and samosas and all sorts of cool things. And because we were sat with the guides on the Nepalese guides on the roof, they used to get the locals rate and then give us the food, and we used to pay for their food because if we got it at tourist rate, it was about 8 times the cost.
It's all about who you know, hey?
Who you know. So if you're watching this and you've still bothered to stay with us, which is highly unlikely, but thanks if you are, maybe you could write in the comment section what your best road trip is. And why. Tell us the story, and with the best story we'll talk about next week. Moving on, Mr. Hopkins, we're here now for that time of the week, your favorite time of the week, where you get to tell us who this week's picture of the week is from.
Well, I don't know what I've gone today, but yesterday we had a public holiday. South Africa love their public holidays. And also, this is probably the most stupid public holiday I've ever heard of. It was Youth Day. I'm freaking out. I've got a 10-year-old boy. Every bloody day is Youth Day. He gets looked after 24/7. So yesterday was Youth Day, the most pointless public holiday. But I saw a photo from Mathew Lovasz. And it was just a really cool photo of his daughter fishing. And you could see the beam on her face as she caught her first fish. And I just, obviously, we've had some really cool stuff with your daughter. You've been doing some really cool videos, and Caitlin's been in there, and I've been playing with fire with Seth and hammocks and stuff. So I thought in recognition of Youth Day and of all the next generation and the work that you and I are doing for We Get Outdoors to ensure that there is something for our kids to enjoy and play around when they're our age, I'd like to thank Mathew for a very cool photo from his daughter and fishing.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I also saw another picture on there today about a dad who, and I can't remember his name, but he's just done like a 14-hour day mixing concrete and laying concrete. And then he went out to the river to go and have an adventure with his son. And he's like, I'll always find time to go and have an adventure for my son. And I thought that is super awesome, because so many people can go and duck out of that and go, I've worked really hard and I'm really tired. And him just saying, nope, I've worked hard, but my kid deserves an adventure and I'm going to take him, I thought was absolutely superb. Somebody who's right up my street of parenting. I love it.
Good. We're going to give that person an honorary mention when we find that photo.
We will do. Yeah. I don't have enough screens in front of me, though, to go and find him at this point in time. So, last bit of this week, Mark, you found an article called Close Calls in the Outdoors. Frankly, I'm not interested in the article. It was by the Washington Post and talks about some close calls that random adventurers have had in the outdoors that frankly aren't that interesting. So I'd like to know, if you're watching this, what your closest call has been. Before I share mine, other than having mercenaries in Kenya stopping you from dying in Somalia, Mark, what's been your closest call in the outdoors?
I've had a few really close encounters with snakes, which, you know, when you get to that stage where you're at the end of a hike and you can't even lift your legs up anymore. You're like dragging them and your head's down. You're not really paying attention as much. And in South Africa, they've got this freaking one of the most venomous snakes called a boomslang. And I nearly trod on that. That would have been a bit of a Brucey disaster. I've had sleeping outside in Namibia, and I woke up and a scorpion was about this far from my face as I woke up next to the fire. That was a little bit of a butt clinching moment. I've had, black mamba. We had one when we did our hike in this game park where we nearly walked on a black mamba. Being charged by rhino, that was another close encounter. We've had a few of those. And even simple ones where you're doing a hike and you've got a mountain to climb and your legs are just not working, but you know that you literally have no choice, that you've got to get over this thing because it's easier to finish this last little bit than turn around and go back. So I think there's some scary ones with animals and some mental close encounters.
I've had a whole number of close encounters in the outdoors, but that wouldn't really surprise you, would it? I did have one in 1998 where I died. I think that was a pretty close encounter. Well, I didn't die, because if I died, I wouldn't be here now. But I died to the point of I have zero memory of what happened, and I died in the Boston, drowned to be precise. That was a pretty close encounter. But I've had many. I woke up in Uganda with a green mamba wrapped around the wooden beam for the hut I was staying in above my head. That was pretty. They had where I was staying. They had a little dog, and when first time I went there, the dog was called Snakebait 2. And when I went back, and that's when the green mamba was about. When I went back a year later, they were on Snakebait 6. And Snakebait just used to run around and play with little Austin, who was their little boy. And whenever whenever, you know what little yappy dogs are like. Whenever the little yappy dog saw a snake, it barked lots and people ran. And the dog got himself in front of the little boy to keep the little boy alive. But unfortunately, many generations worth of snake baits were no longer with us. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Close calls in the outdoors, it's just like a perspective thing, isn't it? Because, you know, one person's terror is another person's adventure.
Yeah. Like there's nothing like same with you when you had that drowning little escapade. You know, you have that moment a little bit and then the next day you're almost back in the water again. It's just like, it's the things that you do just because. It's like today. It's a stupid example, but when I had this thing in my mouth, this tooth thing drained, like the pain's been there for like 5 days, and then they shove needles and stuff into your mouth, and it's excruciating for those 3 to 5 minutes. But then as it leaks out, the pressure releases, and then you stupidly go back again on Friday to have another big operation done on it. And it's the same with the outdoors. Like, you nearly stand on a snake, or I had some close encounters with baboons. But then the next day, you get back out, you put your shoes back on, you put your backpack out, and off you go again. It's just, you just learn, you take more experience, you recognize more signs. You know, when you're that tired, just take a little bit of a longer break to recharge batteries, especially if you're going through area where you know there's going to be snakes. Just rest before you get there, get your wits about you, get through it, and then rest again. I love it. I love those close encounters because it's the only way you learn shit.
It's very, very true. I think close calls are all right as long as you don't have the same close calls in the same way repetitively, because then that just demonstrates a degree of stupidity and not learning from being a numpty.
Yeah, we don't like numpties. Or if you want to die, just go and die, but don't bring anyone else with you.
You please do it quietly somewhere where nobody ever has to see you or deal with it afterwards. That sounds perfect. That's
a good motto.
Yes. So go out there, go have adventures, have some close calls, but please come back to buy me beer afterwards. Actually, interestingly, Mark, they should actually go and listen to and watch the video I made this week that went live on Monday, I think, which is around language in the outdoors and language that will increase your certainty of having an accident in the outdoors. And people should go watch that. I'll put that at the end of this on YouTube, and I'll find a way of tagging it into the comments section here. But your language and the way you approach the outdoors has a direct correlation to whether you're likely to have an accident or not.
That's very fascinating. Well, also, I've just got a little update. This is at the end of the 2018 season. The Himalaya database reports that 295 people are known to have died. There's been 9,159 successful summits by 5,294 people. So only 5,300 people have summited Everest.
And half of those are Sherpas who've done it 5 times.
Exactly. It's another little bombshell.
Not for me, thank you. I don't want to go up Everest.
No. Would you, if you had to, let's say you had to, climb Everest or North Pole?
If I'm to be honest, neither are particularly appealing. I probably would go up Everest.
Really?
Yeah, neither are particularly appealing. The North Pole is one, because I know somebody who's been to the North Pole. I don't know whether they did it unsupported or not, but they were been to the North Pole, Norwegian guy, and he just says it's bleak and boring were the words he said. It's just a long trudge that is all mental. Like, you often can't see your hand in front of your face. It's often the conditions are horrible, and you literally just put like one ski in front of the other, in front of the other, in front of the other for days and days and days on end. And there's no scenery, there's very little beauty. It's just, and everything looks the same through 360 degrees. So I think Everest, because on the way to Everest Base Camp, I've done that, and that's a very beautiful hike, and beautiful Nepalese towns and villages. The mountain itself, that's pretty cool, good views. And and then I could hang out in Nepal afterwards for another month and do other stuff.
You've thought about that, haven't you?
It was a bit on the fly, to be honest with you. I was like joining the bits together, but that you're not going to do a lot of hanging out in the North Pole for a month afterwards.
Well, you get to stroke polar bears.
Actually, a guy we're going to have on the podcast, Jamie Sharp, circumnavigated the Lofoten Isles, which is up inside the Arctic Circle near the quite near the North Pole, the other year, in a sea kayak. And that was one of the big challenges he had, was the large quantity of polar bears.
I can imagine that would. You know me and bears. I'm not the biggest fan of bears.
I am. I think polar bears are an extra special breed all of their own. Polar bears are genuinely hungry all year round, whereas at least like grizzly and brown bears, they're probably as scared of you as you are of them. Whereas polar bears, like, they just don't give a monkeys. They're going to have you whether you like it or not. Polar bears are definitely more vicious. Ugh.
Yeah, and they're humongous things.
They are. Anyway, this brings an end to this week's weekly news, where we've spoken about some random stuff that I really can't remember what it was, but something like kayaks being in high demand in Alabama, about what happened to Mallory and Irvine when they were trying to climb Everest. Did they make it to the summit, or did Irvine end up in Argentina with Adolf Hitler? About our favourite road trips and your favourite road trips. A picture of the week from Mathew, I can't remember his name, Lovasz. And about Mark's and my personal close calls. Malcolm Kelly, who lives in Portland, Oregon, but originates from Scotland, has just put into Facebook his closest call was being stuck in a hydraulic, a whitewater hole for over a minute on a Scotland paddling festival where he couldn't get himself out. And that would be a pretty horrible moment. It's like being trapped in a washing machine underneath the water, being recirculated round and round and round, and not being able to be let free.
Doesn't sound much fun.
No, it doesn't sound much fun. But Malcolm,
glad he pulled through.
Say again.
Glad he pulled through.
I can actually tell you a funny story about Malcolm. We were kayaking together.
I bet that's just what he thought. He goes, "Let me comment on this, like I've been asked to. I'll be a nice tribe member." And now Rob's going to tell a story about me.
That's it. So a few years ago, Malcolm and I worked at an event called Lumpy Waters on the Pacific coast of the USA. And on the Monday, we have a coach's paddle. And we got to the beach, and we got to the car park by the beach, and we couldn't see the sea. All we could do is hear the waves going boom, boom. And there was a high degree of nerves and brown trouser moments. And the waves were 18 feet at 18 seconds. So that means the back of the wave, not the wave face, the bit that curls over, the back of the wave, which is the shorter bit, was 18 feet high. So that means the wave face will be double that, roughly like 36 feet high. And 18 seconds is the period between waves. So like one wave breaks, and then you count to 18 seconds, another wave comes. And all that really means is that the thickness of the wave is denser. So the wave is heavier because there's more water being built up in that 18 seconds for the wave. And Malcolm's just said that was awesome. Yeah, you're right. And anyway, so a bunch of us go to have a go at getting out through all these waves to go play in them. And there was 3 of us in sea kayaks, and Malcolm in his very, very, very short plastic kayak. And we all lost each other in the fog getting out through these huge waves. And we got backflipped and looped and somersaulted, and we got our bottoms handed to us, and we get out the back. And I get out the back first, and then a guy called Sean Morley, who we'll have on the podcast at some point in time, gets out there. And Sean should get out there because he's a world champion and paddling guru. And then Paul Kuthi, who's been on the podcast, he comes out. And then Malcolm comes out in the tiniest boat ever. And I don't know what was going back through Malcolm's mind, but I rather suspect part of it was like, oh shit, now we have to go back, back to the beach. Anyway, at that moment in time, the wind blew and all the fog cleared. And we looked back towards the beach, and it was like a kayaking jumble sale on the beach, with all the great and good of like North American kayak coaches having their bottoms spanked to them by the sea, and like being separated from their kayaks, and paddles going in one direction, kayaks going another direction, another kayak going upside down. And we were the only 4 to make it out the back that day, where we had some very, 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 very big waves to play with. So that's my little Malcolm story. Yeah, that was quite cool.
I bet those are the days where you literally just go, wrong tool, wrong timing.
Yeah. Sometimes, you've got a you've got a comfortable pair of walking boots that are that are not ideal for what you're about to go and do, but they're comfortable, they fit you, you've broken them in. And if you've got a brand new pair of walking boots, but if you use the brand new pair on this hike, you're going to get loads of blisters and your feet end up in a mess. So actually what you do is you go and put the old ones on, because they're comfy and you're not going to end up with loads of blisters. And so in some cases, Malcolm going out in his stupidly small kayak was the boat he knew, and probably was a better move than going in a boat that was completely new to him in those conditions, because they were sporty would be the word that we use.
I love that word, sporty. It's so British.
Sporty. He said, Malcolm says he was paired with Sean Morley. There we go. So we learned something new. Anyway, there we are. More stories and news. If you've got any questions, comments, or views, go and chuck them in the comments on YouTube or Facebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please join our free Facebook group. Watch this space for some super cool stuff coming up in a few weeks' time. We're going to launch a mini webinar series in 2 weeks' time, Mark. Is that right?
Yeah, July. Yeah, start of July.
Start of July, which is all going to be centered around can you work in the outdoors? Can you make money in the outdoors? Can you do it and have the lifestyle you want? Can you make more than minimum wage? Can you set up your own business? And if so, how? That's what that series is going to be about. I think we've got 5 or 6 of those we're going to do, Mark. Is that right?
We've got 6 lined up.
6 lined up. So we're going to be talking about that in the outdoors. I was playing with a title tonight, which is something like turning your outdoor passion into your outdoor profit.
Oh, look at you, such a linguist.
Boom. That's it from me. I get outdoors.
You get outdoors.
We get outdoors. We all get outdoors. Hurrah! Good night from me.
Good night.